Hi guys, let me know if the audio is coming fine. Oh, it's all working, right? Okay, so we are continuing our discussion of the history of Indian philosophy, volume 1 so far. We are in chapter 3, discussing the Upanishads, the early Upanishads, not the later Upanishads. And in this subchapter, we will get into the meaning of the word Upanishad. Hi, Rohan is here. And Chinmay is saying, I hope you got some insights on perennialism. I just googled the concept. I heard the word for the first time. It sounds like basically the translation of Sanatan principles, right? Eternal principles, principles that are ideas that are always true. Namaskar, Abhay is here. Harshavi is here. Namaskar, namaskar. By the way, guys, the second Indian descendant guy announced his presidential run in USA, and I'm absolutely loving this guy, but only loving him objectively. If he does become the president, that's good for USA, bad for India, because what's good for India is that so that all the superpowers get weakened. But if this guy actually becomes the president, he will turn USA around. Not entirely, at least for the next few years. Otherwise, USA is pretty eaten up from inside because of commies and socialists. But at least for the next 10-15 years, थोड़ा बहुत delay करेगा USA का decline. नाम है विवेक कुमारस्वामी, केरलियन डिसेंडेंट है. वहाँ पे ओहायो में बॉर्न हुआ था, उसका बर्थ हुआ था. बाप माँ चले गए थे केरला से. बहुत बढ़िया बात करता है. येल लॉ स्कूल से PhD किया है लॉ में. और अभी उसका 4-5 मिनट का इंटरव्यू सुना टकर कार्लसन में, फॉक्स न्यूज़ में. इतना अच्छा कॉम्प्रिहेंशन स्किल्स है, इतना अच्छा कोहेरेंस है जैसा दीपक जैसा, कि जैसा दीपक को 2 मिनट दो, एक चीज़ का थोड़ा बहुत अच्छा से जिस दे देगा. जैसा दीपक को 30 सेकंड दो और थोड़ा टाइट करके जिस दे देगा. जैसा दीपक को 1 घंटा 2 घंटा दे दो, पूरा सब्जेक्ट ही समझा देगा. तो ये तो बेसिकली लॉयर्स का अच्छा स्किल है. तो वो भी लॉयर है, इसलिए ये स्किल तो है ही उसके पास, कॉम्प्रिहेंशन स्किल्स, क्योंकि बात करके आर्ग्यू करना ही उसका पेशा है. तो अभी कुमार रामास्वामी का 5 मिनट का इंटरव्यू सुन के उसका पूरा डोमेस्टिक पॉलिसी, फॉरेन पॉलिसी सब समझ में आ गया. सब एकदम स्पष्ट बोल दिया. चिन्मय, या ओके, सो शुड वी स्टार्ट. रियली लविंग विवेक कुमारस्वामी. इट विल बी फन टू सी द. और ये एस्टैब्लिश पॉलिटिशियन नहीं है ना, ये तो बाहर का है, एंटरप्रेन्योर है. 2 बुक लिखा है एंटी वोकिज्म के बारे में. तो इसका अभी मुझे तो लगता है रॉन डिसेंटिस प्रेसिडेंट बनेगा अगले साल. तो डिसेंटिस और इसके बीच में जो डिबेट होगा वो अच्छा होगा. प्राइमरीज का डिबेट्स हम लाइव रिएक्ट करेंगे अगर हो सके तो. बहुत मज़ा आने वाला है. निकी हेली ज़्यादा कुछ कर नहीं पाएंगी क्योंकि वो बहुत दिनों की पॉलिटिशियन है ऑलरेडी. तो एस्टेब्लिशमेंट में घुस चुकी है, इसलिए बहुत लोगों से पैसा खा के रखा होगा. तो उससे ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं होगा, थोड़ा बहुत सिर्फ सुंदर बातें ही होगा. अगला असली फाइट है रॉन डिसेंटिस में, और रॉन डिसेंटिस, ट्रम्प, और सो फार आई थिंक बिटवीन विवेक कुमारस्वामी. Abhay saying, what's the channel? Okay, let's start. What's the meaning of the word Upanishad? So the word Upanishad is derived from the root sad with the prefix ni, which means to sit. And Max Muller says that the word originally meant the act of sitting down near a teacher and of submissively listening to him. In his introduction to the Upanishads, Max Muller says that the history and the genius of the Sanskrit language leave little doubt that Upanishad meant originally session, particularly a session consisting of pupils assembled at a respectful distance round the teacher. Deussen points out that the word means secret or secret instruction. And this is borne out by many of the passages. ये देखो, इतना वेस्टर्नर्स, मैक्स म्यूलर और डॉयसन में डिबेट हो रहा है कि संस्कृत का उपनिषद का वर्ड का मीनिंग क्या है. हमारे लोगों को कोई सुन नहीं रहा था, और राम मोहन रॉय ने पास से बोल दिया कि संस्कृत को गोली मारो, इंग्लिश सीखो. ये लोग बैठ के डिबेट करेंगे, खुद से अपना कंक्लूजन बनाएंगे. थैंक गॉड ये सुरंजन दासगुप्ता जैसे लोग थे. डॉयसन पॉइंट्स आउट दैट द वर्ड मीन्स सीक्रेट और सीक्रेट इंस्ट्रक्शन. And this is borne out by many of the passages of the Upanishads themselves. Max Muller also agrees that the word was used in this sense in the Upanishads. कि ये secret information है. There we find that great injunctions of secrecy are to be observed for the communication of the doctrines. And it is said that And it is said that it should be only given to a student or pupil who by his supreme moral restraint and noble desires proves himself deserving to hear them. Shankara, however, the great Indian exponent of the Upanishads, derives the word from the root sad, to destroy, and supposes that it is called Upanishad because it destroys inborn ignorance and leads to salvation by revealing the right knowledge. But if we compare the many texts in which the word Upanishad occurs in the Upanishads themselves, it seems that Deusson's meaning is fully justified. So Surendranath Dasgupta is saying it probably means secret information, secret knowledge, not information, secret knowledge. Okay. Aditya is saying hello Dada, hello. Ifin is saying again, you remember what I said about ex-Muslims or ex-Christian? That will always remain a problem unless we do two things. One, have more kids, yeah. Remake Hinduism into proselytizing religion. हाँ, उसके लिए एक्चुअली थोड़ा घर वापसी ही हो ले, वो भी proselytize, that is also enough proselytization. Bro, you didn't post pics of index of the 3 books. या अभी टाइम नहीं आया, इसके बाद शायद कर दूंगा. अभी इस गैप में बहुत अलग काम खत्म कर रहा था. तो अभी the composition and growth of diverse Upanishads. The oldest Upanishads are written in prose. Next to these, we have some in verses, very similar to those that are to be found in classical Sanskrit. As is easy to see, the older the Upanishad, the more archaic is it in its language, obviously. The earliest Upanishads have an almost mysterious forcefulness in their expressions, at least to Indian ears. They are simple, pithy, P-I-T-H-Y, pithy, and penetrate to the heart. We can read and read them over again without getting tired. The lines are always fresh as ever. Surendranath Dasgupta to abhi fanboy ban gaye Upanishad ka. As such, they have a charm apart from the value of the ideas they intend to convey. The word Upanishad was used, as we have seen, in the sense of secret doctrine or instruction, secret instruction. The Upanishad teachings were also intended to be conveyed in strictest secrecy to earnest enquirers of high morals and superior self-restraint for the purpose of achieving emancipation, which means moksha. It was thus that Upanishad style of expression, when it once came into use, came to possess the greatest charm and attraction for earnest religious people. And as a result of that, we find that even when other forms of prose and verse had been adopted for the Sanskrit language, the Upanishad form of composition had not stopped. Thus, though the earliest Upanishads were compiled in around 500 BC, they continued to be written even so late as the spread of Mohammedan influence in India. The earliest and most important are probably those that have been commented upon by Shankara, namely Brihadaranyaka, Chandogya, Aitareya, Taittiriya, Isha, Kena, Katha, Prashna, Mundaka and Mandukya. It is important to note in this connection that the separate Upanishads differ much from one another. Okay, I see. It's important to note that the separate Upanishads differ much from one another with regard to their content and methods of exposition. Thus, while some of them are busy laying great stress upon the monistic doctrine of the self as the only reality, there are others which lay stress upon the practice of yoga, asceticism, the cult of Shiva, of Vishnu, and the philosophy और एनाटॉमी ऑफ द बॉडी. ये देखो कितना अच्छा कॉन्सेप्ट है. यही मैं, जो लोग वर्कआउट नहीं करते, ये मैं चीज़ लोगों को कन्विंस नहीं कर पाता हूँ कि बॉडी के रन करने का एक खुद का फिलोसफी है, विच वी वर डिस्कसिंग लास्ट डे. दैट इवन नित्या हैड सेड, जस्ट फॉर पीपल हु आर जॉइनिंग इन दिस वीडियो मे बी फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम, दैट नित्या हैड सेड दैट देयर इज मोर फिलोसफी इन द ह्यूमन बॉडी than in any philosophy book in the world. Your body runs in the same order of principles as the cosmology, as society, as nature, as your body. And for example, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's true in case of your mental strength, कि जितना challenges आप face करेंगे उतना आप mentally strong होंगे. Same with your muscles. जितना उसको स्ट्रेस करेंगे उतना उसका स्ट्रेंथ बढ़ेगा, उसमें और भी प्रोटीन जाके मसल डेवलपमेंट भी होते रहेगा. इवन बोन्स में भी पूरा देश में सब कोई पूरा दिन दूध खाता है, मगर सब कोई कैल्शियम डेफिशिएंट है. बुजुर्ग वर्कआउट नहीं करने से कैल्शियम जाएगा भी नहीं. शरीर को वो चाह बनाना होगा कि अच्छा ये करो, अच्छा तो हमको अभी कैल्शियम चाहिए, तब कैल्शियम खाने से कैल्शियम जमा होगा हड्डी में, नहीं तो कैल्शियम सिर्फ जॉइंट में जमा हो जाता है। तो वैसे ही फिलोसफी और एनाटॉमी ऑफ द बॉडी ये सब में प्रायोरिटाइजेशन था। So while some of the Upanishads were busy laying great stress upon the monastic doctrine of the self as the only reality, there are others which lay stress upon the practice of yoga, asceticism, the cult of Shiva, cult of Vishnu, and the philosophy or anatomy of the body, and may thus be respectively called the Yoga, Shaiva, Vishnu, Sarira Upanishads. Sharira Upanishad bhi hai. These in all make up the number to 108. Okay. Let's see if any important comments. What he meant is they were abusing girls and threatened them on a sexual assault. I see. And for that I've given you two things that needs to be done. Remember, dharmo rakshiti rakshita. You need to do your part. Don't think neighbors will make the 5 Pandavas to come save your children. Yes, Apu is saying, bro, do you know about the Hindu rate of growth? No. With more kids we will remain backward as a society. Who will feed so many people? Do we have so much resources? अबे resources का I think factor नहीं है, because resources आ जाता है, resources तैयार होता है because of innovation and because of new technologies. और food security तो हमारा है ही। हम वेस्ट करते, कितना टन का खाना फसल हम वेस्ट करते हैं साल में, सोचो। जस्ट बिकॉज ऑफ स्टूपिड प्राइस कंट्रोल्स, आर्टिफिशियल प्राइस कंट्रोल्स। खाने का कोई कमी नहीं है, जगह का कोई कमी नहीं है। जिसको पसंद नहीं आएगा इंडिया छोड़ के कहीं और वेस्टर्न कंट्री में चला जाएगा। रिसोर्सेज वो एक मिथ है। द एंटायर वर्ल्ड पॉपुलेशन विल टॉप आउट एट 9 बिलियन। अभी 8 बिलियन में पहुंचा है, 9 बिलियन से ज़्यादा कभी नहीं क्रॉस करेगा। Population is a problem only for poor countries and socialist countries. Population is never a problem for rich countries. हाँ, resources बहुत है, exactly. और hold you back as a society, I think you are looking it from the earlier lens. You're looking it as the lens of as if it's a pre-90s Indian socialist economy, right? तब अगर कोई किसी का ज़्यादा बच्चा होता तो बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो जाता। अभी वो प्रॉब्लम नहीं होगा। If an upper middle class person or upper class person has 6 kids, they won't have any problem today. Afin is saying, Nirajan, by the way, Nietzsche would have hated us Hindus. He said a violent society is better than a non-violent one, with us always sharpening our argument and never taking arms. But Nietzsche also said about Manusmriti, remember that he said Manusmriti is the height of intellectual work, and he's saying that close the Bible, throw it away, read the Manusmriti. तो हाँ, सब कोई का भी अलग अलग शेड्स होगा, अलग अलग ओपिनियंस होगा। Everyone's grey from the context of history. Like I've been wondering for the last few days. तो कभी कभी ऐसा होता है ना कि एक गाना सुनने का मन करता है कि बहुत दिन नहीं सुना, चलो वो गाना सुनते हैं। तो for the last few days I've been in the trip of the song Mangala Mangala from Mangal Pandey. So I had seen it alone in a cinema theater. So I decided that let's listen to this song after many years. तो I was appreciating कि आज भी लग रहा है कि कितना अच्छा गाया है कैलाश खेर और सुखविंदर सिंह ने, कितना अच्छा अरेंजमेंट है। लग रहा है कि एक्चुअली कीर्तन बज रहा है, ऐसे अरेंजमेंट किया है। पर वीडियो में देख रहा हूँ कि आज अगर आमिर खान एग्जैक्टली ऐसे ही मंगल पांडे बनाता, एग्जैक्टली यही फिल्म बनाता, हाँ ठीक है, कोई अलग CGI विजीआई नहीं, यही सिनेमा आज अगर रिलीज कर देता, इतना बड़ा हिट होता, कोई समझ नहीं पाएगा। एंड इतना न्यूआंस दिखाया था। पहले दिखाया था कि मंगल पांडे ब्राह्मण है और अछूत को हटा दे रहा है रास्ते से, रिमेंबर एकदम शुरू में फिल्म में। और मंगल पांडे गाने में देख के याद आया कि वो जनेऊ पहना हुआ है। व्हेन इज द लास्ट टाइम you have seen a जनेऊधारी hero in Bollywood especially? I can only remember RRR and Mangal Pandey reminded me that अच्छा इसका जनेऊ था हीरो का। So what the nuance Amir Khan was going for is that yes, even if some Brahmins were Achut, when the time came, they picked up arms and they did what was necessary to free their country and their society. This is the nuance Amir Khan was going for. और फिर उसका दिमाग हिल गया, उसके आसपास में सब वो लोग चले गए, उसको समझाया कि नहीं आमिर भाई देखो ये है आज का ये मसाला है, सबको सेक्युलरिज्म समझाओ अपने मूवी से, क्या भगवान आएगा जाएगा, इसको सबको प्यार मोहब्बत सिखाओ हिंदू मुस्लिम के बारे में। तो वो मंगल पांडे का जैसा फिल्म छोड़ के ये चुतियापा करने लगा। बट देन हिस्ट्री विल हैव टू लुक एट आमिर खान ऑल्सो एज अ ग्रे कैरेक्टर। कि जो ओ माई गॉड बनाया वो जनेऊधारी हीरो बनाया, जो कि अनटचेबिलिटी में बिलीव करता था, फिर भी मार्टर बन गया देश के लिए और प्राउडली जनेऊ पहन के। आज अगर मंगल पांडे रीमेक होता आज के आमिर खान के हाथों से, तो वो जनेऊ हटा देता, हमको बोलना पड़ता कि अरे मंगल पांडे बना दिया विदाउट जनेऊ। संजय दीक्षित को, प्रतीक बोरादे को वीडियो बनाना पड़ता है ऐसे। If anything, or perhaps he was part of the AIT group that though Manusmriti, AIT group, yes. Aryan invasion theory, Manusmriti writers came from Europe to India, yes. That's the same reason Max Muller also says that, that there's all the knowledge and philosophy information is you can find in Indian texts, what you can't find in India, you can't find anywhere else. वो भी उस वजह से ही बोलता था कि ये आर्यन तो आए हैं बाहर से ही, तो इसीलिए उनको अप्रिशिएट कर देते हैं। बट आर्यन बाहर से नहीं आए थे, इसका भी कॉन्क्रीट एविडेंस उतना है नहीं, थोड़ा बहुत एविडेंस दोनों तरफ से है, मगर इन्वेजन नहीं हुआ है इसका तो गारंटी है 100%। वो निज्जा को पता था कि नहीं, वो मुझे नहीं पता है, वो किसी को भी नहीं पता है शायद। अभय सिंह, डू वी नो इंडियन एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड होल्डिंग्स आर रिड्यूसिंग बाई एवरी जनरेशन, इट इज़ नॉट इवन स्केलेबल। हाँ, तो वो तो चेंज करना होगा, वो थोड़ा पॉलिसीज तो ट्वीक करना होगा। सब ज़मीन वमीन बेच के शहर में जाके रहेंगे एक दो फ्लैट में, या विदेश चले जाएंगे। ज़मीन तो सब दे रहा है अपने वो दोस्तों को, मिडिल ईस्टर्न कॉलोनाइजर्स को। ओके, रिवाइवल ऑफ उपनिषद स्टडीज इन मॉडर्न टाइम्स। हाउ द उपनिषद्स केम टू बी इंट्रोड्यूस्ड इनटू यूरोप इज एन इंटरेस्टिंग स्टोरी। दारा शिको, द एल्डेस्ट सन ऑफ द एम्परर शाहजहां, heard of the Upanishads during his stay in Kashmir in 1640. He invited several pandits from Banaras to Delhi, who undertook the work of translating them into Persian. In 1775, Anquetil Duperron, the discoverer of the Zend-Avesta, Zoroastrians ka Dharma Granth, the discoverer of the Zend-Avesta received a manuscript of it presented to him by his friend Le Gentil, the French resident in Faizabad at the court of Shujauddaulah. Anquetil translated that Avesta into Latin, which was published in 1801-1802. Oh no! I think they are talking about the translation done by Darashiko, the Persian Upanishad translation done by Darashiko, financed by Darashiko. Okay, वो मिल गया Anquetil को, उसने दिया अपने दोस्त ले जेंटिल को। अच्छा, at the French resident in Faizabad at the court of Shujauddaulah. Anquetil translated it into Latin, Persian से Latin में translate कर दिया उपनिषद को, which was published in 1801-1802. This translation, though largely unintelligible, was read by Schopenhauer with great enthusiasm. It had, as Schopenhauer himself admits, profoundly influenced his philosophy. Thus he writes in the preface to his Welt als Wille und Vorstellung that, and if indeed in addition to this he is a partaker of this is Schopenhauer saying, okay, it's his quote, and if indeed in addition to this he is a partaker of the benefit conferred by the Vedas, the access to which opened to us through the Upanishads, is in my eyes the greatest advantage which this still young century enjoys over previous ones, because I believe that the influence of the Sanskrit literature will penetrate not less deeply than did the revival of Greek literature in the 15th century. If I say the reader has also already received and assimilated the sacred primitive Indian wisdom, then is he best of all prepared to hear what I have to say to him. I might express the opinion that each one of the individual and disconnected aphorisms which make up the Upanishads may be deduced as a consequence from the thought I am going to impart, though the converse, that my thought is to be found in the Upanishads, is by no means the case. Again, how does every line display its firm, definite and throughout harmonious meaning? This is still Schopenhauer saying. From every sentence, deep, original and sublime thoughts arise, and the whole is pervaded by a high and holy and earnest spirit. In the whole world there is no study except that of the originals, so beneficial and so elevating as that of the Upanikhat. उसने उपनिखत बोला है क्योंकि पर्शियन में शायद ये उल्टा पुल्टा ट्रांसलेशन कर दिया था, या फिर वहाँ से लैटिन जब हुआ तब उपनिषद को उपनिखत बोल दिया. It has been the solace of my life. It will be the solace of my death. एंड कोट. ये थोड़ा मार्क कर लेता हूँ मैं. शोपेनहावर ने बोला है ये कभी डिबेट में काम आएगा मुंह में मारने के लिए. देखो हिंदू फैसिस्ट का लिटरेचर. अरे मेरा पेन खराब हो गया. अच्छा छोड़ो, पेज को फोल्ड कर देता हूँ. Okay. The study of the Upanishads has, however, gained a great impetus by the earnest attempts of our Ram Mohan Roy, who not only translated them into Bengali, Hindi, and English and published them at his own expense, but founded the Brahmo Samaj in Bengal, the main religious doctrines of which were derived directly from the Upanishads. अच्छा देखते हैं. अच्छा ब्राह्मण समाज को लेकर शायद कोई बात नहीं होगा. तो अच्छा this is good to know that this was done by Ram Mohan Roy. Lots of comments. Okay, I'll go on with the book. The Upanishads and their interpretations. Before entering into the philosophy of the Upanishads, it may be worthwhile to say a few words as to the reason why diverse and even contradictory explanations as to the real import of the Upanishads had been offered by the great Indian scholars of past times. The Upanishads, as we have seen, formed the concluding portion of the revealed Vedic literature and were thus called the Vedanta. It was almost universally believed by the Hindus that the highest truths could be found in the revelation of the Vedas. The concept called reason was regarded generally as occupying a comparatively subservient place, and its proper use was to be found in its judicious employment in getting out the real meaning of the apparently conflicting ideas of the Vedas. अच्छा, ये interesting concept है कि रीजन को वैसे उतना प्रायोरिटी नहीं दिया जाता था. रीजन कब हमें चाहिए? व्हेन डू वी हैव टू गो बियॉन्ड द जस्ट द स्ट्रॉन्ग फेथ बिलीव कि ये करना है. उसके ऊपर कब जाएंगे? जबकि ये कौन चीज़ करना है इसका इंटरप्रिटेशन लेके या कोई कमांडमेंट या कोई एडवाइस का इंटरप्रिटेशन लेके बहुत ज़्यादा कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हो रहा है, तो वो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट रिजॉल्व करने के लिए हमको रीज़न अप्लाई करना है. बाकी समय हर वक्त रीज़न अप्लाई करने का ये जो प्रेमिस है आजकल, that was not the case according to the Vedic rishis at least. Okay, I can't underline anything, so just let me refresh my pen. Now, इतना देर खोल के रखा था इसलिए खराब हो गया. हाँ ठीक हो गया. कौन सी बुक है ये? हर्ष रवि, हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन फिलोसॉफी. This is the fourth installment of our live streams on discussing history of Indian philosophy. Rohan is saying, but implementing strict two-child policy can create huge gender disparity. China learned the hard way. Yeah, no question. I think there should be strict policy that everyone has to have 2 kids. Okay. So Upanishads, as we have seen, formed the concluding portions. यहाँ ये तो हो गया. तो रीजन का क्या जगह है ये बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है, बहुत नुआंस्ड है, बहुत सटल है. It was almost universally believed by the Hindus that the highest truths could only be found in the revelation of the Vedas. Reason was regarded generally as occupying a comparatively subservient place, and its proper use was to be found in its judicious employment in getting out the real meaning of the apparently conflicting ideas of the Vedas. तब reason employ करना है, बाकी समय हर वक्त reason नहीं करना है. The highest knowledge of unlimited truth, the highest knowledge of ultimate truth and reality was thus regarded as having been once for all declared in the Upanishads. Reason had only to unravel it in the light of experience. वाह ये अच्छा कॉन्सेप्ट है. रीजन कब यूज करना है उपनिषद्स के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में? कि ओनली टू अनरेवल इट इन द लाइट ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस. जब जिस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में जो एक्सपीरियंसेस चल रहा है जिंदगी में, उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में उपनिषद का क्या एप्लीकेशन है, ये एप्लीकेशन समझने के लिए रीजन का इस्तेमाल ज़रूरी है. तो it is important that readers of Hindu philosophy should bear in mind the contrast that it presents to the ruling idea of the modern world. Yes, exactly what we just discussed here, right? कि आजकल का ये जो कॉन्सेप्ट है कि रीजन इज द टॉप, रीजन इज एवरीथिंग, रीजन इज लॉजिक, रीजन के ऊपर कुछ नहीं है. दैट वाज नॉट द केस देयर. सो दिस इज काइंड ऑफ a little decolonial approach here because it's pre-colonial in nature. It is important that readers of Hindu philosophy should bear in mind the contrast that it presents to the ruling idea of the modern world that the new truths are discovered by reason. Remember, Deepak had written in India, that is Bharat, that ये जो रीजन का वेपनाइजेशन है, हाँ ये है रीजन, ये है तुम्हारा घटिया धर्म, या ये है रीजन, ये है अल्टीमेट चीज़. रीजन का मोनोपोलाइजेशन रीजन कॉन्सेप्ट का, और रीजन का वेपनाइजेशन अगेंस्ट हिंदुइज्म. तो ये जो रूलिंग आइडिया ऑफ द मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड है दैट न्यू ट्रूथ्स आर डिस्कवर्ड बाय रीजन एंड एक्सपीरियंस एवरी डे, एंड इवन इन दोज केसेस वेयर द ओल्ड ट्रूथ्स रिमेन, they change their hue and character every day, and that in matters of ultimate truths no finality can ever be achieved. We are to be content only with as much as comes before the purview of our reason and experience at the time. It was therefore thought to be extremely audacious that any person, howsoever learned and brilliant he might be, should have any right to say anything regarding the highest truths simply on the authority of his own opinion or the reasons that he might offer. In order to make himself heard, it was necessary for him to show from the texts of the Upanishads that they supported him and that their purport was also the same. हाँ ये तो ठीक ही है. It's like saying citation दो, source दो, कहाँ से ये conclusion draw किया, उपनिषद से उठा के बोलो कि कहाँ से मिला ये तुमको. Thus it was that most schools of Hindu philosophy found it one of their principal duties to interpret the Upanishads in order to show that found it one of their principal duties, all schools of Hindu philosophy, that duties to interpret the Upanishads in order to show that they alone represented the true Vedanta doctrines. तो इसमें competition हो गया कि सबको ही Upanishads interpret करना है. In order to show that they alone represented the true Vedanta doctrines. Anyone who should feel himself persuaded by the interpretations of any particular school might say that in following that school, he was following the Vedanta. ठीक है? The difficulty of assuring oneself that any interpretation is absolutely the right one is enhanced by the fact that germs of diverse kinds of thoughts are found scattered over the Upanishads which are not worked out in a systematic manner. Thus, each interpreter in his turn made the texts favorable to his own doctrines prominent and brought them to the forefront and tried to repress others or explain them away. ये तो होना ही है. But comparing the various systems of Upanishad interpretation, various systems of Upanishad interpretation, we find that the interpretation offered by Shankara very largely represents the view of the general body of the earlier Upanishad doctrines, though there are some which distinctly foreshadow the doctrines of other systems, but in a crude and only germinal form. It is thus that Vedanta is generally associated with the interpretation of Shankara, and Shankara's system of thought is called the Vedanta system, though there are many other systems which put forth their claim as representing the true Vedanta doctrines. Under these circumstances, it is necessary that a modern interpreter of the Upanishads should turn a deaf ear to the absolute claims of these exponents and look upon the Upanishads not as a systematic treatise but as a repository, that is a storehouse, जैसे as a repository of diverse currents of thought, the melting pot in which all later philosophic ideas were still in a state of fusion, though the monastic doctrine of Shankara, or rather an approach thereto, may be regarded as the purport of by far the largest majority of the texts. ये इंटरेस्टिंग कॉन्सेप्ट है कि आज अगर कोई उपनिषद इंटरप्रेट करने बैठे, पढ़ने बैठे और अप्लाई करने बैठे, तो उसको ये करने का ज़रूरत नहीं है कि ये स्कूल ऑफ थॉट या फिर ये उपनिषद, ये वेदांत डॉक्ट्रिन, ये अल्टीमेट है. उसको ये सोचना चाहिए कि देखो कितना सारा आइडियाज़ सब मिल रहा था उपनिषद में ही, उपनिषद से कितना सारा डाइवर्स थॉट्स और काइंड्स ऑफ थॉट सिस्टम्स निकला है, वो देखो, वो अप्रिशिएट करो, क्योंकि ये एक रिपोजिटरी ऑफ आइडियाज़ है. विच इज़ एग्जैक्टली व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू डू विद दिस. हर घर में जैसा दीपक चाहिए, ओके, रिमेंबर. मे बी रिगार्डेड एज द पर्पट ऑफ बाई फार द लार्जेस्ट मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द टेक्स्ट. तो शंकरा का जो थॉट्स है, दैट इज काइंड ऑफ मे बी रिगार्डेड एज द पर्पट ऑफ बाई फार द लार्जेस्ट मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द टेक्स्ट. It will be better that a modern interpreter should not agree to the claims of the ancients that all the Upanishads represent a connected system, but take the texts independently and separately and determine their meanings, though keeping an attentive eye on the context in which they appear. It is in this way alone that we can detect the germs of the thoughts of the other Indian systems in the Upanishads, and thus find in them the earliest records of those tendencies of thoughts. हाँ, तो हमको कोई कोई कंक्लूजन ड्रॉ करने के लिए पढ़ने का ज़रूरत नहीं है. मॉडर्न इंटरप्रेटर को क्या करना है? A modern interpreter should not agree to the claims of the ancients that all the Upanishads represented a connected system, but instead the modern interpreter should take the texts independently and separately and determine their meanings, though keeping an attentive eye on the context in which they appear. It is in this way alone that we can detect the germs of the thoughts of other Indian systems in the Upanishads, and thus find in them the earliest records of those tendencies of thoughts. तो अगर कनेक्टेड है भी तो भी प्रॉब्लम नहीं दिख रहा है मुझे. कनेक्टेड है या नहीं, पढ़ना तो है सब कुछ ही. हर घर में जैसा दीपक की जाए. यस. Rohan is saying freeing Hindu temples is necessary. Using the temple wealth we can help our Hindu. Exactly. Or remember how to free Hindu temples? Just block any national highway near your house. Take 5 to 10 people. Block the national highway. Get ready to be beaten up by the police and don't move from there. And take some water cannons. Wait till 2024 elections. वैसे ही हिंदू टेम्पल्स फ्री हो जाएगा. वी हैव बीन गिवन द रोड मैप बाई मोदी हिमसेल्फ कि रास्ता ब्लॉक करो, सब काम हो जाएगा. शाइनबर्ग में बैठ जाओ फ्री हिंदू टेम्पल्स के लिए, कोई मना नहीं कर रहा है. ओके, अनदर सब चैप्टर बिगिंस. द क्वेस्ट आफ्टर ब्राह्मण. ब्राह्मण का खोज शुरू होगा अभी. द स्ट्रगल एंड द फेलियर्स. The fundamental idea which runs through the early Upanishads is that underlying the exterior world of change, there is an unchangeable reality. ये तो perennialism जैसा है. आहा, कितना अच्छा सुंदर लाइन है ये. Underlying the exterior world of change, जो कि हर वक्त चेंज हो रहा है. Change is the only constant. Underlying that there is an unchangeable reality, which is identical with that which underlies the essence in man. Which is identical with that which underlies the essence in man. अच्छा, man में भी कुछ unchanging essence है. If we look at Greek philosophy in Parmenides or Plato, or at modern philosophy in Kant, we find the same tendency towards glorifying one unspeakable entity as the reality or the essence. I have said above that the Upanishads are no systematic treatises of a single hand, but are rather collations or compilations of floating monologues, dialogues, or anecdotes. There are no doubt here and there simple discussions, but there is no pedantry or gymnastics of logic. Even the most casual reader cannot be struck with the earnestness and enthusiasm of the sages. Oh, okay, cannot but be. I read this wrong. Even the most casual reader will definitely be struck with the earnestness and enthusiasm of the sages. चलो कभी ना कभी तो लाइव स्ट्रीम में उपनिषद भी पढ़ेंगे. They run from place to place with great eagerness in search of a teacher competent to instruct them about the nature of Brahman. Where is Brahman? What is his nature? We have noticed that during the closing period of the Samhita, there were people who had risen to the conception of a single creator and controller of the universe, variously called Prajapati, Vishwakarman, Purusha, Brahmanaspati and Brahman. ये सब same है. Once and for all, these are all same concepts, okay? Which I am claiming that is dark energy according to theoretical physics of today. But this divine controller was yet only a deity. The search as to the nature of this deity began in the Upanishads. अच्छा, अब deity से भी खुश नहीं है ये लोग. Nature of the deity, nature of the all supreme energy that's driving everything. उसका nature क्या है? The search as to the nature of this deity began in the Upanishads. Many visible objects of nature, such as the sun or the wind on one hand, and the various psychological functions in man were tried, but none could render satisfaction to the great ideal that had been aroused. कहाँ है ब्राह्मण? The sages in the Upanishads, the sadhus, the rishis in the Upanishads had already started with the idea that there was a supreme controller or essence presiding over man and the universe. But what was its nature? Could it be identified with any of the deities of nature? Acha. Or was it a new deity? Or was it no deity at all? The Upanishads present to us the history of this quest. So Upanishads is a compilation of all the discourse that was happening. Okay, so look at Upanishad as a journal. Upanishad is not one scientific paper. It's a journal where lots of journal articles are being written by different scholars. ये है वो चीज़ उपनिषद, अभी हमको समझ में आ रहा है. So I'm being a modernist, a colonialist kind of, कि अच्छा it's like that European thing, but these are universal principles, and I would happily claim that this is where these ideas have come from, because even Arthashastra is written exactly like a technical paper of today. Chanakya quotes this guy, cites these people, and then says I agree with him, this rishi on here, I disagree with this rishi on this, etc. So Upanishad is kind of like a journal where different discourses were being compiled. So the Upanishads present to us the history of this quest के nature of ये ब्राह्मण, ब्राह्मणस्पति या प्रजापति, ये deity है कि कुछ deity हो ही नहीं सकता, या इस deity का nature क्या है, ये सब प्रश्न का quest was compiled in the Upanishads, and the results that were achieved were also in the Upanishads. When we look merely to this quest, we find that we have not yet gone out of the Aranyaka ideas and of symbolic or pratika forms of worship. Pratik. We have so when we look merely to this quest, we find that we have not yet gone out of the Aranyaka ideas and of symbolic forms of worship, that is pratika forms of worship. Prana, or vital breath, was regarded as the most essential function for the life of man, and many anecdotes are related to show that it is superior to the other organs, such as the eye or ear, and that on it all other functions depend. Prana, vital breath. This recognition of the superiority of prana brings us to the meditations on prana as Brahman, as leading to the most beneficial results. So prana began to be considered to be same as Brahman, the spirit, soul, or maybe oxygen. So also we find that owing to the presence of the exalting characters of omnipresence, and eternality, which is akasha, space, is meditated upon as Brahman. So also Manas and Aditya, which is sun, are meditated upon as Brahman. Again, side by side with the visible material representation of Brahman as the pervading Vayu or the sun, and the immaterial representation as Akasha, Manas or Prana, we find also the various kinds of meditations as substitutes for actual sacrifice. Okay, ये तो है, he was setting the premise for this already, that meditations begin to become substitutes for actual sacrifice. Thus it is that there was an earnest quest after the discovery of Brahman. We find a stratum of thought which shows that the sages were still blinded by the old ritualistic associations, and though meditation had taken the place of sacrifice, yet this was hardly adequate for the highest attainment of Brahman. अच्छा, meditation का importance बढ़ा, but it was still not considered to be everything. Next to the failure of the meditations, we have to notice the history of the search after Brahman, in which the rishis sought to identify Brahman with the presiding deity of the sun, moon, lightning, ether, wind, fire, etc. and failed. अच्छा, तो ये Brahman के खोज में the rishis decided to identify Brahman with the presiding deity of all the physical aspects of nature, etc., but failed because none of these could satisfy the ideal they cherished of Brahman. अच्छा, because उन्होंने तो theoretical एक concept बनाया हुआ है कि ये है Brahman is all of this, मगर जो भी deity बना रहा है, sun को या moon को या ether को, जो भी हो, उस सब में Brahman का हर characteristics नहीं मिल रहा है. So therefore they are unsatisfied with the research now. See, this is just pure research कि theory में prove हो गया है Brahman. So think of this as theoretical physics of those days or theoretical philosophy. प्रैक्टिकलिटी में लग रहा है कि अच्छा नहीं, ये ब्राह्मण हम जो थ्योरी में बना है वो तो सन में नहीं है, मून में भी नहीं है, तो मतलब वो तो और भी थोड़ा किसी ने बनाया होगा, किसी ने सोच के बताया होगा कि या सन इज ब्राह्मण, किसी ने बोला होगा मून इज ब्राह्मण, किसी ने बोला होगा हाँ सन, मून, ईथर, आकाशा, वायु सब कुछ ब्राह्मण है. फिर उसके बाद का अगला रिसर्च में कोई काउंटर करता है कि नहीं, इससे नहीं हो रहा है, this does not meet the criteria for Brahman, what we conceptualized as Brahman. So it is indeed needless here to multiply these examples. तो हाँ, और एग्जाम्पल्स डिसाइड करने देख के कोई फ़ायदा नहीं है, क्योंकि दे वर नॉट ब्राह्मण, because the rishis themselves were not happy with these examples. It is indeed needless here to multiply these examples because they are tiresome, not only in this summary treatment but in the original as well. They are of value only in that they indicate how toilsome was the process by which the old ritualistic associations could be got rid of. हाँ, तो कितना हार्ड वर्क वो ऋषिज ने किया होगा. What struggles and failures the sages had to undergo before they reached a knowledge of the true nature of Brahman. हाँ, ये tremendous academic rigor, dedication, focus, hard work बहुत दिनों का, with absolutely no physical comfort. Yeah, I mean, a middle class, I think I have more comfort today than Chandragupta Maurya and even Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj had, right? थोड़ा comments पढ़ लेते हैं. We should first focus on what we are doing wrong and try to correct it. Chinmay is saying we see both Sagun Brahman and Nirgun Brahman, but there is still confusion on what is the nature of Brahman. Would like to hear other thoughts on this. Abhay is saying think at the systemic level. These small fixes want to learn from Israel. Yes, I am all for learning from Israel. Afin is saying that we need to capture all means, not just the means of production. You have the boss. उसके लिए तो street power लगेगा. Afin, what's your age? Acha. Now a new subchapter is beginning. Unknowability of Brahman and the negative method. It is indeed true that the magical element involved in the discharge of sacrificial duties lingered for a while. वो concept यज्ञ वगैरह sacrifice का concept थोड़ा बहुत और दिन चला. Lingered for a while in the symbolic worship of Brahman, in which he with capital H, the Brahman itself, in which he was conceived almost as a deity. The minds of the Vedic poets, so long accustomed to worship deities of visible manifestation, could not easily dispense with the idea of seeking after a positive and definite content of Brahman. They tried some of the sublime powers of nature and also many symbols, but these could not render ultimate satisfaction. They did not know what the Brahman was like, because they had only a dim and dreamy vision of it in the deep craving of their souls, which could not be translated into permanent terms. हाँ, यही तो हमेशा का समस्या है. इसीलिए तो आइडल वर्शिप आज के दिन में भी अल्टीमेटली काम आ ही जाता है कि मेडिटेट करके, स्पेकुलेट करके, कॉन्टेम्पलेट करके वो सेटिस्फैक्शन भी नहीं आता है, वो समझाना भी प्रॉब्लम है, और एग्जैक्ट कोई कॉन्क्रीट रिजल्ट्स पे पहुंच भी नहीं सकते. इसीलिए तो आइडल वर्शिप शुरू हुआ और उसका इम्पोर्टेंस आज भी ख़त्म नहीं हुआ. मतलब दो तीन सेट ऑफ कॉलोनाइजेशन हो गया, लोगों ने आइडल वर्शिप नहीं छोड़ा इस कारण से. बट दिस वॉज एनफ टू लीड देम ऑन टू द गोल, बिकॉज दे कुड नॉट बी सेटिस्फाइड विथ एनीथिंग short of the highest. They found that by whatever means they tried to give a positive and definite content of the ultimate reality, the Brahman, they failed. Whatever means they tried to give a positive and definite content of the Brahman, they failed. Positive definitions were impossible. अच्छा, अभी इसके लिए हम नेगेटिव डेफिनेशंस में जाएंगे. नेगेटिव डेफिनेशंस इज नॉट बैड हियर. नेगेटिव मीन्स नेगेशन वाला, कि अच्छा ये नहीं है, इसका मतलब ये है. तो पॉजिटिव डेफिनेशंस वर इम्पॉसिबल. पॉजिटिव डेफिनेशंस में इस वर्ड का ब्रेकडाउन होगा कि हम कोई थ्योरी पोजिट करते हैं ना, हम कोई प्रपोजल पोजिट करते हैं, आई पोजिट दिस, तो वो पोजिट करने वाला, जो ऑल्टरनेटिव देने वाला, या ये थ्योरी दिया है, देखो ये है ब्राह्मण, वो डेफिनेशंस वर इम्पॉसिबल. They could not point out what the Brahmin was like in order to give an utterance to that which was unutterable. They could only say that it was not like aught that we find in experience. So you could see this kind of is a definition of Hinduism also, right? It's a negation. We have a negative definition of Hinduism. Okay, we are a coalition of all the parties who are not Hindu Muslim, and also if positive, we would have to say that we follow the Vedas. We are a Vedic civilization. Other than that, it has to be a negative definition. So they could not point out the Brahmin they could not point out what the Brahmin was like in order to give an utterance to that which was unutterable. They could only say that it was not like aught aught, not like aught it was not like aught that we find in experience. Acha. They could not say what it was, but they could say what it wasn't. Yagyana Valkya. Okay, Yagyavalkya said, Yagyavalkya ka quote hai ye. Quote, he, the Atman, is not this, nor this, neti neti. He is inconceivable, because he cannot be conceived. Unchangeable, because he is not changed. Untouched, because nothing touches him. He cannot suffer by a stroke of the sword. He cannot suffer any injury. Okay, this chapter, this exact concept I have read in Aurobindo's Sri Aurobindo's The Life Divine. अब ये book पढ़ के actually Life Divine समझना और भी आसान होगा. I think I'll do a separate live stream after we finish these books on Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine as well. बहुत बढ़िया बुक है. मैंने 150-200 पेज पढ़ा है. बहुत कठिन इंग्लिश है. Other than that, it's a phenomenal piece of work. Okay, so he cannot suffer by a stroke of the sword. He cannot suffer any injury. Nothing touches him, because he is not changed, untouched. He's unchangeable, and he cannot be conceived. He is asat, non-being. For the being which Brahman is not to be understood as such being as is known to us by experience. So he is asat, non-being, because Brahman जो being है, for the being which Brahman is cannot be or is not to be understood as being as is known to us by experience. Yet he is being, for he alone. Yet he is being, because he alone is supremely real, because the universe subsists by him. We ourselves are but he. Yes, we ourselves are but he, and yet we know not what he is. यही औरोबिंदो का बेसिक बुक का बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट है. वी आर सेल्व्स आर बट ही एंड येट वी नो नॉट व्हाट ही इज. Whatever we can experience, whatever we can express is limited, but he is the unlimited, the basis of all. Sri Aurobindo calls this the inexplicable realities. Now a quote says, that which is inaudible, intangible, invisible, indestructible, which cannot be tasted nor smelt, eternal, without beginning or end, greater than the great Mahat, the fixed. He who knows it is released from the jaws of death. End quote. Space, time, and causality do not appertain to him. Do not have no connection with him, because he at once forms their essence. At once meaning all at once. एक ही साथ में. He at once forms their essence and transcends them. Yeah, that Brahman is everything. That Brahman एक ही वक्त पे at a time is the essence, and at the same time transcends those things of which he is the essence. Okay, ये grasp करने का ही बहुत mental gymnastics है. Mental bodybuilding. डंबल उठाना ब्रेन से. He is the infinite and the vast. एक बार और पढ़ लेते हैं ये सेंटेंस. Space, time and causality do not appertain to him, because he at once forms their essence. वो space, time और causality का बात कर रहे हैं. ठीक है. तो space, time और causality का essence है Brahman, और at the same time the Brahman who is the essence of space, time and causality also transcends space, time and causality. हाँ, अब ठीक है. लोग ऑफलाइन हो जाएंगे ये सब सुन के. He is the infinite and the vast, yet the smallest of the small. At once here as there as here. No characterization of him is possible, otherwise than by the denial to him of all empirical attributes, relations and definitions. ये तो बहुत, I think any Shaivites here, doesn't this fall into the definition of what Lord Shiva is as well? So I guess Lord Shiva is a manifestation of the Brahman as well. Yeah, of course he is. So it seems like the definition that we studied in the paper we discussed called from Vedic Rudra to Puranic Shiva. This is the concept that was discussed. So we need, and that is why Harsh Madhusudhan was saying in the discussion arranged by Kushal Mehra a few days back on caste. The interview was called Diversity of Thought. It was a great discussion. It's the best discussion on caste I've ever seen. It had Anand Ranganathan, abhijit mitra, Kushal Mehra and Harsh Madhusudan. तो हर्ष मधुसूदन को आनंद रंगनाथन ने पूछा कि डू यू बिलीव इन गॉड. he said that God concept को हम क्या करें. I don't need to use the word God. I believe in Shiva. This is what he meant. This तो obviously is there. Again, dark energy according to theoretical physics. He, Brahman, he is independent of all limitations of space, time and cause which rules all that is objectively presented and therefore the empirical universe. When Bahava was questioned by Vaskali, he expounded the nature of Brahman to him by maintaining silence. Teach me, said Vaskali, most reverend sir, the nature of Brahman. Bahava, however, remained silent. But when the question was put forth a second or third time, he answered, I teach you indeed, but you do not understand. The Atman is silence. The way to indicate it is thus by neti neti. Negation. Neti neti का meaning एक बार और देख लेते हैं. He, the Atman, is not this, nor this. It is not this, it is not this. We cannot describe it by any positive content, which is always limited by conceptual thought. एक सब चैप्टर एंड हुआ, थोड़ा कमेंट्स देख लेते हैं. प्लीज डिफाइन विष्णु एज वेल. आई डोंट नो, मैं तो ये सब अभी अभी पढ़ रहा हूँ. अभय बोल रहा है कि क्रिश्चियन चर्चेस सपोर्ट एजुकेशन हेल्थ केयर. हाँ ये तो है. Ifin is saying Bengalis need to start Nav Anushilan Samiti. Yes, for young Hindu men need to restart Kshatriya tradition. Bro Nirajan, can you look into how to get Upanishads like the major 11 with translation of a gigantic Upanishads with 115 Upanishads, but it's in Sanskrit with no translations. हाँ मैं कभी ना कभी तो खरीदूंगा. मेरे पास बंगाली में है, बहुत इतना सा छोटा सा है, उसमें तो ज़्यादा नहीं होगा, तो मैं कहीं ना कहीं से पूरा उपनिषद पढ़ूंगा ही. Okay, Chinmay is saying here in Maharashtra there is a concept called mandals. Yeah. Mandals is a group or samiti, right? Almost every Hindu here joins mandal and we are taught sword fighting. We are taught granths like Dhyaneshwari by Sant Dhyaneshwar. Wow. Temples used to do this for Hindus. State completely castrated the system and it continues to castrate it today because they don't give us solid gun license. Harsh is saying, have you heard the discussion on caste by Op India in which JSD, Harsh Madhusudan all were there? अरे ये कब हुआ? ये तो देखना होगा. Nice. Thank you for recommending. अच्छा, अभी एक नया सब चैप्टर शुरू हो रहा है, The Atman Doctrine. अगले दिन पेपर डिस्कशन में I think we'll discuss a paper on Atman. I found a great paper in J Store discussing atom and Atman. It's based on Kanada's sutras. Okay, the sum and substance of the Upanishad teaching is involved in the equation that Atman is equal to Brahman, because वो pranic all vital energy, that was called prana. So prana is soul, spirit, so therefore Atman is an interchangeable word with prana and therefore it's equal to Brahman. We have already seen that the word Atman was used in the Rig Veda to denote on the one hand the ultimate essence of the universe. So देखो, the argument that Upanishad is completely different from Rig Veda, that argument does not hold here for this very reason कि ऋग वेदा में ही ये concept already was touched upon, right? ऋग वेदा में ही ये concept, जो डार्क एनर्जी का concept है theoretical physics का, वो ऋग वेदा में ही है. उसके बाद later वेदा, फिर उपनिषद्स. तो Atman was used in the Rig Veda to denote on the one hand the ultimate essence of the universe and on the other the vital breath in man, prana. But it was not called prana, it was called Atman in Rig Veda, but the concept was prana. Today we know it as prana. Later on in the Upanishads we see that the word Brahman is generally used in the former sense. So yeah, later on in Upanishads we see that Brahman is used in the sense that is the ultimate essence of universe, while the word Atman is reserved to denote the inmost essence in man, जिसलिए आजकल आत्मा बोलते हैं. And the Upanishads are emphatic in their declaration that the two are one. Wow. Atman and Brahman are same. Upanishads emphatically बोल रहा है, and the same. Or then we have Maha Atman, which is Mahatma Gandhi. But what is the inmost essence of man? The self of man involves an ambiguity as it is used in a variety of senses. Self of man तो बहुत senses में use होता है. Thus, so far as man consists of the essence of food, that is the physical parts of man, he is called Annamaya. Annamaya. Yeah, because remember, Maya is many things. Maya does not have a proper translation in English. In Bengali, Maya means love. In some contexts, Maya means illusion. But Maya is something different. Maya does not have a proper translation. And Aurobindo actually does this in his book without even saying it explicitly, that वो जो concept है राजीव मल्होत्रा का कि we need to Sanskritize English. Aurobindo does it anyway. His book is full of Sanskrit words in heavy English, in otherwise heavy English, where he doesn't even bother to translate it. He does not even try. He just uses that word and moves on. So Annamaya, that is the physical parts of the body, essence of food. But behind the sheath of this body, there is the other self consisting of the vital breath, which is called the self as vital breath, pranamaya atman. Okay, this also doesn't this sound like a similar concept which is in Ayurveda, that the sthula sharira and shukshma sharira, the subtle and the physical material body. So pranamaya atman and annamaya. Behind this again, there is the other self consisting of will, called the manomaya atman. आहा, ये बहुत बढ़िया लगा. एक है the physical, दूसरा है vital breath, तीसरा है manomaya, the mind, the will, the manomaya atman. This again, okay, इसके भी बाद है एक और है. चलो, this again contains within it, उसके अंदर मनोमया आत्मन के अंदर है consisting of consciousness, called the Vijnanamaya Atman. Vijnana means consciousness. Okay, so अन्नमाया का पीछे है प्राणमाया आत्मन, प्राणमाया का पीछे है मनोमाया आत्मन, मनोमाया के अंदर है विज्ञानमाया आत्मन. Atta, pranmaya atta, monomaya atta. Moy and Maya is same in Bengali. But behind it, if we come to the final essence, the self as pure bliss, the Anandamaya Atman. Yeah, I've read these concepts in Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine. Satchitananda, Sat Chit Ananda, truth, consciousness, bliss. But behind it, we come to the final essence, the self as pure bliss. The texts say, quote, truly, he is the rapture. For whoever gets this rapture becomes blissful. For who could live, who could breathe if this space, Akasha, was not bliss? Akasha is bliss. That's why we are breathing here. This is not a bad concept. This is pretty scientific. Okay? Earth में तो Akasha is bliss. That's why we can breathe. और जगह में तो कोई जिंदा नहीं रह रहा है. For it is he who behaves as bliss. For whoever in that invisible, self-surpassing, unspeakable, supportless, finds fearless support, he really becomes fearless. Wow, what was sentence? अच्छा, ये फिर से सुनते हैं. For who could live, who could breathe if this space or Akasha was not bliss? It's definitely bliss. Because it is he who behaves as bliss. Because whoever in that invisible, self-surpassing, unspeakable, supportless finds fearless support, he really becomes fearless. But whoever finds even a slight difference between himself and this Atman, there is fear for him. अगर removed करके सोचो, then you'll have fear in your life. Again, in another place, we find that Prajapati said, the self, Atman, which is free from sin, free from old age, from death and grief, from hunger and thirst, whose desires are true, whose cogitations are true, that is to be searched for, that is to be inquired. Acha. The self, the Atman, which is free from sin, free from old age, from death and grief, and free from hunger and thirst, whose desires are true, whose cogitations are true, that is to be searched for, that is to be inquired. he gets all his desires and all worlds. He gets all his desires and all worlds who knows that self. The knowledge of that self, वो self जिसको पता चल गया, he gets all his desires and worlds who knows that self. The gods and the demons, on hearing of this, sent Indra and Virochana respectively as their representatives. The gods sent Indra and Virochana respectively as their representatives to inquire of this self or Brahman from Prajapati. He agreed to teach them and asked them to look into a vessel of water and tell him how much of self they could find. They answered, "We see this is our whole self, even to the hair and to the nails." And he said, Prajapati said, "Well, that is the self. That is the deathless and the fearless. That is the Brahman." They went away pleased, but Prajapati thought, "There they go away without having discovered, without having realized the self." Virochana came away with the conviction that the body was the self, but Indra did not return back to the gods. He was afraid and pestered with doubts and came back to Prajapati. What a beautiful situation. And said, okay, now Indra is saying to Prajapati, just as the self becomes decorated when the body is decorated, well dressed when the body is well dressed, well cleaned, just as the body becomes well cleaned, just as the self becomes well cleaned when the body is well cleaned, even so that image self will be blind when the body is blind, injured in one eye when the body is injured in one eye, and mutilated when the body is mutilated, and it perishes when the body perishes. Therefore, I can see no good in this theory. Look at this, such great discourse, such great conversation, speculation and questioning, such great questioning is going on between Prajapati and Indra. Amazing. Prajapati then gave him a higher instruction about the self and said, Prajapati is saying, he who goes about enjoying dreams, he is the self. This is the deathless, the fearless. This is Brahman. Indra departed but was again disturbed with doubts. Yes, because he was pretty vague. Prajapati did not give him clear answers. Even I am having doubts. Indra departed but was again disturbed with doubts and was afraid and came back and said, in now Indra's quote here, that though the dream self does not become blind when the body is blind, or injured in one eye when the body is so injured. He's talking about the dream now, the dream self, the consciousness which is seeing dreams in the sleep. He's talking about that self. So वो जो self है, though that dream self does not become blind just because the body goes blind, or it does not become injured in one eye when the body is so injured, and is not affected by its defect, and is not killed by destruction, but yet it is as if it was overwhelmed, as if it suffered, and as if it wept. In this I see no good. Prajapati gave a still higher instruction. Prajapati says, when a man fast asleep in total contentment does not know any dreams, this is the self, this is the deathless, the fearless, this is Brahman. Indra departed but was again filled with doubts on the way and returned again and said, the self in deep sleep does not know himself. Right. Indra is saying the self in deep sleep does not know himself, that I am this, nor does he know any other existing objects. वो तो unconsciousness है. He is destroyed and lost. I see no good in this. ये देखो, क्वेश्चन करते रहो, एक बार बोल दिया रट्टा मार के नहीं होगा. He keeps questioning Prajapati कि समझाइए ठीक से. He is destroyed and lost. I see no good in this. And now Prajapati, after having given a course of successively higher instructions as self as the body, Prajapati was claiming that the self was the body, as the self in dreams, and as the self in deep dreams sleep, deep dreamless sleep. Okay, so Prajapati said, self is the body, self is the dreams, and self is the deep dreamless sleep. And having found that the inquirer, in this case Indra, And found that Indra in each case could find out that this was not the ultimate truth about the self that he was seeking. So Prajapati was giving fake answers just to push him, ताकि वो प्रजापति को पता चले कि ये ऐसे ही कुछ भी बोल दूंगा समझ लेगा और बोल देगा कि हाँ हाँ समझ गया, या फिर एक्चुअली सोच के कॉन्टेम्पलेट करके क्वेश्चन करेगा. तो ही वॉज टेस्टिंग इंदिरा बेसिकली. अरे मैंने कैमरा का तार हटा दिया, 1 मिनट. तो now he's going to give the actual answer, I think. The ultimate, okay. So and now Prajapati, after having given a course of successively higher instructions as self as the body, self as in dreams, and self as the self in deep dreamless sleep, and having found that the inquirer Indra in each case could find out that this was not the ultimate truth about the self that he was seeking, ultimately gave him the ultimate and final instruction about the full truth about the self, and said, "This body is the support of the deathless and the bodiless self. The self as embodied is affected by pleasure and pain. The self, when associated with the body, cannot get rid of pleasure and pain. But pleasure and pain do not touch the bodiless self." As the anecdote shows, they sought such a constant and unchangeable essence in man. They tried to seek out an unchangeable essence and constant essence in man, as was beyond the limits of any change. This inmost essence has sometimes been described as pure subject-object-less consciousness, the reality and the bliss. This is what Aurobindo says, Satchidananda. It's obviously must have been said by other people as well. He is the seer of all seeing, the hearer of all hearing, and the knower of all knowledge. That self, the bodiless self. He sees but is not seen, hears but is not heard, knows but is not known. He is the light of all lights. He is like a lump of salt with no inner or outer, which consists through and through entirely of savor, S-A-V-O-U-R. As in truth, just like in truth, this Atman has no inner or outer, but consists through and through entirely of knowledge, jnana. Bliss, Ananda, is not an attribute of it, but it is Ananda, bliss itself. Okay. So ये आत्मन का एक characteristic is not Ananda. आत्मन का एक characteristic is not Ananda. Atman is Ananda itself. The state of Brahman, the nature of Brahman is thus likened unto the state of dreamless sleep. अच्छा, तो एक comparison जैसा है कि Brahman is just like the condition of a dreamless sleep. And he who has reached this bliss is beyond any fear. It is dearer to us than any son, brother, wife, or husband. It is dearer to us than son, brother, wife, or husband, wealth, or prosperity. It is for it and by it. It is for it and by it that things appear dear to us. अच्छा, इसके वजह से. It is for it and by it that things appear dear to us. It is the dearest par excellence, our inmost Atman. All limitation is fraught with pain. It is the infinite alone that is the highest bliss. When a man receives this rapture, then is he full of bliss, Ananda. For who could breathe, who live, if that bliss had not filled his void, his Akasha? It is he who behaves as bliss. Because when a man finds his peace, his fearless support in that invisible supportless, because when a man finds his peace, his fearless support in that invisible, supportless, inexpressible, unspeakable one, then has he attained peace. Jai Shri Ram Rana Prajapati. Nihilist is saying, found an interesting article about Mughals draining wealth out of India, Islamic loot. Abhay is saying the shenanigans of Nehruji. Okay. What a great concept. Let me just drink some water. बहुत deep चीज़ें हो गया यहाँ पे. Okay. Whoever's joining now, I'll suggest them that please start listening to this video from the very beginning. बहुत important और heavy चीज़ें discuss हो गया. So it's all going to be in context what we are going to listen to now. अच्छा, अभी place of Brahman in the Upanishads. उपनिषदों में ब्राह्मण का क्या जगह है? There is the Atman not in man alone, but in all objects of the universe, the sun, the moon, the world. And Brahman is this Atman. There is nothing outside the Atman, and therefore there is no plurality at all. As from a lump of clay, this is why Hinduism is not monotheistic, nor is Hinduism polytheistic. Hinduism is not henotheistic. I think the best word can be called as polyformism. Is the best word to describe Hinduism. Or Vedic religion, Vedic Dharma, Sanatan Dharma is polyformism according to me. As just like from a lump of clay, all that is made of clay is known. Just like from an ingot of black iron, all that is made of black iron is known. So when this Atman, the Brahman, is known, everything else is known. The essence in man and the essence of the universe are one and the same, and it is Brahman, the essence. Now a question may arise as to what may be called the nature of the phenomenal world of color, sound, taste and smell. Usko kya naam de? But we must also remember that the Upanishads do not represent so much a conceptual system of philosophy as visions of the seers who are possessed by the spirit of this Brahman. They do not notice even the contradiction between the Brahman as unity and nature in its diversity. When the empirical aspect of diversity attracts their notice, they affirm it and yet declare that it is all Brahman. वो लोग बोलते हैं कि हाँ ये सब है, ये diversity है, मगर वो सब ब्राह्मण है. From Brahman it has come forth, and to it will it return. He has himself created it out of himself, and then entered into it as its inner controller, Antaryamin. Here is thus a glaring dualistic trait of the world of matter and Brahman as its controller. Though in other places we find it asserted most emphatically that these are but names and forms, and when Brahman is known, everything else is known. No attempts at reconciliation are made for the sake of consistency of conceptual utterance, as Shankara, the great professor of Vedanta, does by explaining away the dualistic texts. Okay. So matter and Brahman, who is causing matter. Antaryamin, world of matter, and Brahman as its controller of the world of matter. The universe is said to be a reality, but the real in it is Brahman alone. It is on account of Brahman that the fire, तो एक concept discuss हो रहा है कि एक concept है Brahman. It is on account of that conceptual or theoretical Brahman that the fire burns and the wind blows. He is the active principle in the entire universe, and yet the most passive and unmoved. कुछ एक order है. It's not all chaos, just there is something is going on, something is leading these things to happen. It's not random. The world is his body, yet he is the soul within. तो एक concept बना के छोड़ नहीं दिया है. उस concept को एक shape देने का कोशिश किया गया है हिंदुइज्म में और mainly उपनिषद में. तो the world is that Brahman, that the driving force behind everything, uska body, and yet he is the soul within the world. A quote says from a Upanishad that he creates all, wills all, smells all, tastes all, he has pervaded all, silent and unaffected. End quote. He is below, above, in the back, in front, in the south and in the north. He is all this. Another quote from an Upanishad says that these rivers in the east and in the west, originating from the ocean, return back to it and become the ocean themselves, though they do not know that they are so. So also, all these people coming into being from being, okay, be, the second being is with B with capital letter, okay? So also that all these people coming into being from the capital letter being do not know that they have come from the capital letter being. That which is the subtlest, shukshma. That which is the subtlest, that is the self. That is all this, the truth. That self thou art, O Svetaketu. Brahman, Joyson points out that Brahman was regarded as the cause antecedent in time and the universe as the effect proceeding from it. Universe is the effect, Brahman is the cause. The inner dependence of the universe on Brahman, the inner dependence of the universe on Brahman and its essential identity with him was represented as a creation of the universe by and out of Brahman. Thus it is said in Mundakya Upanishad 1.1.7 that as just like a spider ejects and retracts the threads, just like the plants shoot forth on the earth, just like the hairs on the head and the body of the living man, so just like that from the imperishable all that is here, just like the sparks from the well-kindled fire, in nature akin to it, just like that spring forth in their thousands. In nature akin to it, spring forth in their thousands. So, my dear sir, from the imperishable living beings of many kinds go forth and again return into him. So, my dear sir, from the imperishable living beings of many kinds go forth and again return into him. Yet this world principle is the dearest to us, and the highest teachings of the Upanishads is that art thou, that you are that. Again, the growth of the doctrine about the growth of the doctrine that Brahman is the inner controller in all the parts and forces of nature and of mankind as the Atman thereof, and that all the effects of the universe are the result of his commands, which no one can outstep, gave rise to a theistic current of thought in which Brahman is held as standing aloof as God and controlling the world. Yes, that's fine. Brahman can be considered the God. Brahman is considered the God in Hinduism. It is by his ordaining, it is said, that the sun and moon are held together, and the sky and earth stand held together. God and soul are distinguished again in the famous verse of Svetashvatara. God and soul. Okay, so the Brahman and the soul are distinguished again in the famous verse of Svetashvatara. Two bright-featured bosom friends flit around one and the same tree. One of them tastes the sweet berries, the other, without eating, merely gazes down. This is an interesting way of looking at it. वो ब्राह्मण गॉड को इंसान के सोल के साथ कंपेयर किया है श्वेताश्वतारा ने. बोल रहा है कि टू ब्राइट फेदर्ड बोजम फ्रेंड्स फ्लिट अराउंड वन एंड द सेम ट्री. एक ही पेड़ के चारों ओर घूम रहा है, बट एक स्वीट बेरी खा रहा है और एक देख रहा है कि वे दोस्त स्वीट बेरी खा रहा है, ऊपर से देख रहा है, गेजेस डाउन. बट इन स्पाइट ऑफ दिस अपेरेंट theistic tendency and the occasional use of the word Isha or Ishana, there seems to be no doubt that theism in its true sense was never prominent, and this acknowledgement of a supreme lord was also an offshoot of the exalted position of the Atman as the supreme principle. Yes. So this is why when a Hindu says they are atheist, they are spiritual, not religious, I don't know what the fuck that means. This sentence does not mean anything when a Hindu says it. You don't even know what you are supposed to worship as a Hindu. you're worshipping the dark energy in theoretical physics. Thus we read in Kaushitaki Upanishad 3.9, quote, he is not great by good deeds, nor low because of evil deeds, but it is he makes one do good deeds whom he wants to raise, and makes him commit bad deeds whom he wants to lower down. He is the protector of the universe, he is the master of the world and the lord of all, he is my soul Atman. अच्छा, यहाँ पे एक इंटरेस्टिंग कॉन्सेप्ट है कि तो यहाँ पे बहुत ही डिटर्मिनिज्म है. यहाँ पे बोल रहा है कि then this is kind of a postmodernism argument as well, that you are not in control. No, it's not postmodernism, it's a stupid misrepresentation. Postmodernism बोलेगा कि society makes the person, there's no individuality. But here Upanishad is saying that it's not the society, but कोई ना, the Brahman is handling you, your individuality. तुम खुद से अच्छा काम या गलत काम नहीं कर रहे हो, कोई करवा रहा है तुमसे, उसे तुम पसंद नहीं हो इसलिए तुमसे खराब काम करवा रहा है. Thus the Lord, in spite of his greatness, is still my soul. There are again other passages which regard Brahman as being at once immanent and transcendent. Thus it is said that there is that eternally existing tree whose roots grow upward and whose branches go downward. All the universes are supported in it and no one can transcend it. Is it Kalpataru? I don't know. This is that, quote, from its fear the fire burns, the sun shines. वो ट्री के fear से, जिसका roots ऊपर है, branches नीचे है. From its fear the fire burns, the sun shines, and from its fear Indra, Vayu and death, the fifth, with the other two run on. If we overlook the different shades in the development of the conception of Brahman, ये जो theoreticization of ये concept है of Brahman का, if we overlook the different shades, the थोड़ा nuances, different nuances है in the development of the conception of Brahman in the Upanishads, and look to the main currents, तो थोड़ा अगर gist और या mainstream thoughts को देखें on depending on the topic of these conceptions of Brahman, we find that the strongest current of thought which has found expression in the majority of the texts is this, that the Atman or the Brahman is the only reality, and that besides this everything else is unreal. The other current of thought which is to be found in many of the texts is the pantheistic creed. Okay, the other current of thought which is to be found, it's not the mainstream, but there is a current of thought like this as well. The other current of thought which is to be found in pantheistic in many of the texts is the pantheistic creed that identifies the universe with the Atman or Brahman. Okay. So the difference is that they are saying the universe is the Atman or Brahman. The mainstream source is saying, the mainstream texts are saying that the universe is created by the Brahman, and they are saying the universe is the Brahman. The third current is that the third set of opinions is that of theism, which looks upon Brahman as the Lord controlling the world. Okay, so it's much more concrete. It's not an imaginary theoretical physics thing. It's a concrete thing. There's a thing that is doing all this. Brahman is a thing. It is because these ideas were still in the melting pot. ये तो सिर्फ social churn हो रहा है, ये सिर्फ philosophical churn हो रहा है, बहुत funding मिल रहा है, beautiful research हो रहा है, क्योंकि इंडिया तभी economic superior power है, रोमन एम्पायर के साथ ट्रेड डेफिसिट चल रहा है, उनको हम माल इतना बेच रहे हैं, वो उतना बेच नहीं रहे हमको, ये सब चल रहा है, तब ये सब उपनिषद लिखा जा रहा है. So the third current is that of the theism, which looks upon Brahman as the Lord controlling the world. It is because these ideas were still in the melting pot, in which none of them were systematically worked out, that the later exponents of Vedanta, Shankara, Ramanuja and others, quarreled over the meanings of texts in order to develop a consistent systematic philosophy out of them. Thus it is that the doctrine of Maya, अच्छा अभी माया डिस्कशन, हाँ ये सब पढ़ के मुझे श्री अरबिंदो का बुक पढ़ना चाहिए था, तो और थोड़ा समझ में आता. ये बहुत लूसिड राइटिंग में है, कितना अच्छा स्मूथ लिखा है. It feels like Sandeep Sanyal's writing almost. It's just a little more difficult than Sandeep Sanyal because the concept is more difficult. But otherwise in 1920s में ये तो लिखा है, 1922 का बुक है ये. 1922 में कोई ऐसे लिखता नहीं था. इनका कॉम्प्रिहेंशन स्किल बहुत ही अच्छा है, इसलिए इतना लूसिड समझा रहा है. श्री अरविंदो का बुक अगर मैं पढ़ूँ, एक पैराग्राफ 7-8 बार पढ़ना पड़ेगा, उसके बाद एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए और 7-8 बार पढ़ना पड़ेगा, हाफ एन आवर, एक घंटा लग जाएगा एक पेज पढ़ने में, ऐसा कठिन बुक है वो. So thus it is that the doctrine of Maya, which is slightly hinted at once in Brihadaranyaka and thrice in Svetashvatara, becomes the foundation of Shankara's philosophy of Vedanta, in which Brahman alone is real and all else beside him is unreal. अच्छा, ये है डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ माया. ये एक अच्छा जगह है. एक सब चैप्टर एंड हुआ. बहुत हैवी लिफ्टिंग हो रहा है आज ब्रेन का. तो शंकरा रामानुजा को झगड़ा करना पड़ा ये सब डिबेट करने में. In the later exponents of Vedanta, Shankara, Ramanuja and others quarreled over the meanings of texts in order to develop a consistent systematic philosophy out of them. So, but thankfully we have Surendranath Dasgupta, who has given us this beautiful compilation. Okay, थोड़ा पानी पी लेते हैं. हर्ष, अच्छा यहाँ पे पैरल डिस्कशन चल रहा है. ओके, नाउ एक इंटरेस्टिंग नाम है सब चैप्टर का. नाम है द वर्ल्ड. We have already seen that the universe has come out of Brahman, has its essence in Brahman, and will also return back to it. But in spite of its existence, this is also predicted in the video I posted in my community tab today, that the time lapse of the universe, even theoretical physicists have predicted this, that one day time will lose its meaning. Nothing happens and nothing keeps on happening. एक nothingness जो है, that is what Upanishads, Vedas are saying, that one day it will all return back to the Brahman and will also return back to it. But in spite of its existence as Brahman, but in spite of the world's existence as Brahman, its character as represented to experience could not be denied. अच्छा, universe का बात हो रहा है. We have already seen that the universe has come out of Brahman, has its essence in Brahman, will return to Brahman, but in spite of its existence as Brahman, its character as represented to experience could not be denied. Shankara held that the Upanishads referred to the external world and accorded a reality to it consciously with the purpose of treating it as merely relatively real. So the external world is merely relatively real according to Shankaracharya's interpretation. ये शंकराचार्य ही तो है ना, आदि शंकराचार्य आई गेस. तो Shankaracharya's interpretation of the Upanishads, which will eventually appear as unreal. The external world is merely relatively real, which will eventually appear as unreal as soon as the ultimate truth, the Brahman, is known. Brahman जब समझ में आ जाएगा तब ये सब कुछ unreal लगेगा. This, however, remains to be modified to this extent that the rishis had not probably any conscious purpose of according a relative reality to the phenomenal world. But in spite of regarding Brahman as the highest reality, they could not ignore the claims of the exterior world. Right. But in spite of regarding Brahman as the highest reality, they could not ignore the claims of the exterior world, obviously, and had to accord a reality to it. The inconsistency of this reality of the phenomenal world with the ultimate reality, ये जो contradiction है between the phenomenal, the physical external world and versus the ultimate and only reality of Brahman, was attempted to be reconciled by holding that, by claiming that this world is not beside him, but it has come out of him. It is maintained in him, and it will return back to him. Now, the world is sometimes spoken of in its twofold aspect, the organic and the inorganic. All organic things, whether plants, animals or men, have souls. Brahman, desiring to be many, created fire. Acha. Brahman, desiring to be many, created fire, tejas, water, up, and earth, kshiti. Then the self-existent Brahman entered into these three. अच्छा, ये सब बना है फिर उसमें घुस गया the Brahman. And it is by their combination that all other bodies are formed. These basic elements: fire, water, and earth. Then the self-existent Brahman entered into this, and it is by their combination that all other bodies are formed. So all other things are produced as a all other things are produced as a result of an alloying or compounding of the parts of these three together. In this theory of the threefold division of the primitive elements lies the earliest germ of the later distinction, especially in the Samkhya school, of pure infinitesimal substances, the tanmatra, and gross elements, and the theory that each gross substance is composed of the atoms of the primary elements. In Prashna 4.8, we find that gross elements, yes, we were discussing it in context of Brahma Purana as well and Rig Veda as well. I was telling you all that I had heard this in Swami Samarpanananda's Bengali interpretation of the Rig Veda explanation. So, in Prashna 4.8, Prashna Upanishad, we find the gross elements distinguished from their subtler natures. Subtle meaning sukshma. Okay, for example, earth and the subtler state of earth, Prithvi Matra. In Taittiriya Upanishad 2.1, however, ether, Akasha, is also described as proceeding from Brahman, and the other elements, air, fire, water, and earth, are described as each proceeding directly from the one which directly preceded it. Yeah. तो एक ब्राह्मण से एक आया, फिर ब्राह्मण और वो चीज़ मिलके एक और चीज़ हुआ, फिर ब्राह्मण और फर्स्ट चीज़ और सेकंड चीज़ मिलके थर्ड चीज़ हुआ, ऐसे ऐसे बढ़ते हुए गया. And therefore the characteristics also go on. So let's say Brahman is the starting source, then A, B, C, D. So Brahman plus A is equal to B. Brahman plus A plus B is the characteristic of C. The characteristic of D is Brahman plus A का character, B का character, C का character, ऐसे, and so on. Now a new subchapter begins called the world soul. The conception of a world soul. नहीं यहाँ पे ख़त्म करते हैं आज, बहुत हेवी हो गया है, इतना इन्फॉर्मेशन ओवरलोड हो नहीं पाएगा, किसी से दिमाग में कुछ रहेगा भी नहीं ये. फिर वी विल टेक इट अप टुमारो ऑन थर्सडे. ओके, थोड़ा रिकैप कर लेंगे ये लास्ट पेज का, देन वी विल डिस्कस इट ऑन आइदर वेडनेसडे और थर्सडे. विल सी व्हाट ग्रेट पेपर्स वी फाइंड. अभी सिर्फ 6 लोग ही ऑनलाइन है, 1:40 बज गया, संडे रात को हम बहुत फिलोसफी चर्चा हो गया, अच्छी बात है. ओके, सो आई विल सी यू tomorrow night we are discussing Manusmriti again. Monday night is Manusmriti night. I'll announce the live stream link as well. So thank you for joining the live stream, guys. I'll post the pictures of these books as Afin had asked. So I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Thank you for coming.